thing in this theater. Everybody in the back, please sit down or leave. And all the people that are here and are still awake, did not sleep over from the last one. We're gonna get now still an interesting topic from Winfried Tilanus about privacy or privacy, however you call it, and identity processes. Winfried Tilanus.
Hi, good evening. It's great to see there's still lots of people, but a little less than with then. Well, privacy, or maybe I should say privacy. When we talk about privacy, we all feel it's very important. We don't want to lose our privacy. But it seems to be a bit fuzzy. What is privacy? What is it about? Where is privacy about? Is it about information? Or is it about control? And how comes that there are some people I want less privacy with and some people I want more privacy with? And what is anyway so important about me that's worth protecting? What about me is so important? These certainly are not. I don't feel these are important. Neither this, something out of my DNA, I believe. Neither do I feel that with this, something that's essential of me gets extracted from me. So what is so important about me? Who am I? Help! All right, what went wrong here? I believe what went wrong is that we started at the wrong side. We started with privacy and not about thinking who we are, what our identity is, what we want to protect. So, I will try to go the other way around in this talk. I will start with identity. And then from there on, I will move to a new definition of privacy. I've tried to make some revolution there. And finally, I will translate that back to some challenges we have in the digital age and try to get some new answers or new view on the problems we're facing. So let's move on with identity. I think to understand what identity is, it's a quite big problem. There are lots of philosophers, sociologists, and so on talking about them. I won't get you in all these discussions. You know, they're only fun when you get paid to do that. But there are two people I want to talk about here. The first one is Sigmund Freud. The other one is Michel Foucault. To start with Freud, he says identity is a process of identification. It's a process of saying I am the same as you. It's a process of saying I feel the same, I belong to you, and by that building up some own identity. Something like that. We look the same, we do the same, we have the same party, we're all hackers at the big hackfest, or whatever, we are the same, and that's the way Freud thinks your identity is built. Then to move on to Foucault. Well, Foucault went the other way around, and he made it a bit nastier, identity. He said, identity is about difference. Identity is about you saying you're other, something else different from me. And with Foucault, it's also about power. Foucault says, identity is a process of saying, you are a criminal, you are an outlaw, you are mad, you are a terrorist, you should be locked away. Identity with Foucault is a very nasty process. Extremely nasty it can be. And believe me, being dead is one of the least things that can happen, according to Foucault. Well, great. So how to move on from here? We have these two processes. The one of Freud saying, I'm the same as the other, and one of Foucault saying, I'm different from you. And now there are some smart asses, all right, nice boys and girls, in some stream which says call themselves cultural identity, and they say both happen at the same time. Both things happen, and both things at the same time together make up our identity. Quite conflicting processes. Well, quite a story, but what can we conclude about identity then? Well, it's dynamic. It is something that is happening. It's not something fixed. It is the process of saying we're the same, of getting said you're different. It's about positioning. It's about how two persons or two entities position towards the other. And it's in a relation. Identity can't be understood without looking at the relation it's created in. So, this is some corner out of the philosophy and sociology, psychology, mixture of it, on what identity might be. Well, let's move on. Back to these. Are these my identity? No, they are not. They are just tokens that are being handed out inside a relation to remember the relation. They're just a bunch of tokens. They have nothing to do with my identity. These can get stolen. I can lose these. People can steal my password, my credentials, my certificates, whatever. But these are tokens and not my identity. So, now let's try to understand privacy. What is privacy then about? When we take this view on identity as starting point. Well, I hate slides with lots of text, but this one I have to do. Privacy is the ability to influence the identity processes in a relationship by controlling the information the other party has about you. So, it is about information. It is about controlling that information. But it's bound to a relationship, and it has a purpose, that information. It's not just any information, it's information you need to influence the identity processes in that relationship. Wow, that's something else than my name or my login or whatever. So, how does it happen? How does this work, this privacy? Well, it works all the time, automatically. I'm shielding off information all the time that I don't want others to have. Things I don't want to know because I think that would imply the wrong kind of relationship. For example, them accessing my money makes that I start shielding off information. But also, the information I present is very dependent on what I expect from the relationship. When I expect that you would love to see me as a family man, well, I would present a picture of me as a family man. When I expect you would like to see me more as a sporty outdoor person, well, present the other happy picture of me. It's automatically presenting, and you do this with all the time, not only images, in the things you wear, not only in the information you shield, but also all the time in every word you talk to anybody, you make positionings. You do this all the time. You make these choices all the time. You make these choices, and by these choices you determine the relation. And even before you have a relation, but when you start inviting people on your blog and on your Twitter or whatever, you do this. Or even here by walking around and wearing a certain t-shirt or whatever, you make choices about what you present about yourself and show a picture of yourself. So if you want to invite people, for example, for a very personal relationship, well, the best thing to do is to present very personal information on your blog. What else? You know, if you want a formal relationship, you don't present that. Or the other way around. So there it already starts. Then how can you betray privacy? What do you have to do to violate somebody's privacy? Well, let's give an example of one way. Let's imagine you confess to me I am a heterosexual, expecting that I might react understanding or maybe even supportive. Now, I answer, well, you filthy conservative conformist. That wouldn't be nice for me, wouldn't it? Well, by this answer, I break the expectations. You have the feeling that you shared something private, something that would be appropriate to share in the relationship, and I break the expectation, I break the relationship. And by it, I have the feeling that I betray your privacy. I do something else with the information you handed over to me than you expected me to do. That's one way to betray your privacy. I have even a more subtle example of this. Imagine I make a nice administration of the sexual performances of every partner I had. I know people who did it. Even if they don't know I have this administration, I know for sure that the relation with these girls wouldn't be the same. There's already some privacy aspect, even if they don't know it, because it has to do with the information in the relationship and how you relate to each other. All right, move on. Other way to violate privacy is by eating an aircraft meal. Joke. Is by requesting, for example, a vegetarian aircraft meal. Then there's some authority that wants to know what I eat in the aircraft. They think he's vegetarian. Oh, he doesn't eat meat. Maybe he's afraid there's pork meat in his meal. Maybe that's because he's a Muslim. Maybe when he's a Muslim, he's a terrorist. So let's strip search this guy at the border. What's happened here is that the information I handed over in one relationship, my relationship with the aircraft carrier, is handed over to a third party that at once uses it to create another relationship. So this is the more classical idea you have by violating privacy, something you don't want the other party to know, to become public, or to become known to somebody else. Let's move on. There's a bit of a sidestep here, but I think it's quite interesting. Let's have a look at identity management. Wait a moment. Managing identity processes. Managing how two people relate to each other, how they position, what they say to each other. Well, that is beyond George Orwell's wildest dream. But fortunately, when people hear of people in the ICT world talk about identity management, they don't mean this. They just mean using one of the tokens that they've handed out in several relationships. Just the reuse of tokens. So, is that mostly harmless? Might be. When it's just the token saying, this is the same person you have been relating to before, then it's harmless. But the picture might get quite different at the moment that the token is accompanied with information. When using the token in several relationships also means making information available in several relationships. Then the picture becomes quite different. Then it might be possible that the information I created or made public in one relationship is reused in other relationships where I don't want it to be used. Then that might be harmful. But if it is harmful, or if there is a privacy issue with identity management, can't be said on forehand. It has to be determined from relation to relation, from case to case. So it's quite impossible to guard generally the privacy when the identity management is accompanied with the handing over of information. So be aware, be careful what might happen there. Also, think about this one. What do you see here? Google Analytics. Don't know how well you know it, but this is the most successful case of identity management I know. Because almost every computer has the same cookies from Google stored. The same cookies are also read when you log in with Google, and the same cookies are read with every website on Google Analytics that you visit. So what happens? The one token, the cookie Google stores on your computer, is used all over the world on numerous websites, again, to prove this is the one and the same person. I think many, many designers of identity management systems are dreaming of this much reach. Time to move on. Time to move on to the challenges that the digital age poses us. And I see 3 of them. And the first one is a question. Who do I talk to when I pick up the phone here? Who is on the other side of the line? Who am I talking to? I think it is the person I call. I think it's just a person like me on the other side of the line. Or, who am I chatting to? And I start to chat. All those nicks. No, those are the persons I'm chatting to. Nice discussion here. But, isn't there more to it? And I think that's the first challenge. It's a challenge that I call of the hidden carriers. Because what happens is that the organizations or the telecoms, server admins, whatever, aren't that invisible, aren't that absent at all. There is somebody at the switchboard. There always has been. There is a server admin administrating the server park. There is an ISP providing my internet connection. And these generate more and more lots of information about who is calling who, what's going over the line, whatever. And together with this generation of information, there are also a lot of pressure from the society, from the politics, to disclose the information, to use this information. There's a lot of pressure to go tapping on the internet. There's a lot of pressure to reveal who's calling who. You know, listen to Scott McIntyre, for example, from Access for All. He's really get upset about it. But the problem is, and I think that's the real problem, when I pick up the phone, I still think I'm not talking to my telephone company. I think I'm talking to somebody at the other side of the line. I don't expect the telephone company to interfere here. I don't have a relation like that with the telephone company. I pay them to connect me, not to listen to my telephone calls. So, when they do have to interfere for some reason, or when they do interfere, they change a relationship. They create or interfere in a relationship where I don't want them, I don't see them. And I might get very angry at the telephone company, or might get very angry at my ISP. And I think that this is a place where they get very, very vulnerable. No customer wants that from their services, but they do get more and more often forced to do it. And they're really getting in between the expectations of the customers and society, and that's a really difficult position. I really don't want to be an ISP in these days. Also note that about the same story is valid for social networking sites or, for example, for search engines. You don't want to interfere them. I don't know if anybody has seen the movie I Love Alaska about search queries that were revealed. I believe it was Yahoo I believe it was Yahoo. And there they followed one person, query for query for query, and you got a picture of that person that was more personal than you could ever imagine. But still, we don't think we have that kind of relation with a search engine. So they are also in a very vulnerable position. The second challenge I see, I call them these forced relations. You know, when I want to have water at home, I'm forced to use my local water company. Can't do without them. Same is true for organizations that hold a monopoly. Same is true for organizations, government organizations, for example, that I really can't do without. These organizations have a forced relationship with me, and they are not new. There's always been there. But in the digital age, something got new. They start generating an immense amount of information about all the customers. And the customers can't walk away. They can't say, we don't want this. They can't say, we don't want to have this relation because they are into this forced relation. And not only is it very easy to store this information, it's very easy to track the customers, it's very easy to retrieve that information on the individual level. So, what happens is you have these forced relations, and the organizations that have these forced relations see the benefits of the database server. They sure don't know how they get interesting information out of it. They sure do know how they see the possibilities to get more profit, to do advertising with it. But they don't, or usually don't ask the question, does this forced relation I have bring extra responsibility? Is it so that because of this forced relation, I have to be careful with how I deal with my customers, with how I deal with the data I store? And it happens all too often that the organizations that are involved in this don't ask themselves these questions. They just see the possibility, think the sky is the limit, and go on with the databases. And that's really an ethical question I think they should ask. Then the third challenge, but I call it, these are the panopticons, as I call them. And I have to go back a bit in history to deal with this one. And I have to go back to this bloke, it's Jeremy Bentham. And he lived in a time where it was quite usual when there was a criminal to chop the criminal to pieces. Nice way to deal with criminals. But Jeremy Bentham was enlightened and he thought there should be a better way to handle criminals. And he came up with the next idea. He said, if there's surveillance with the uncertainty that you might be observed anytime, so wherever you go, day and night, you might be observed, but you don't know if you are really observed at that moment or not. And if there's a system of reward and punishment coupled to this, then people start showing the desired behavior automatically. Great. At least a lot of better way to deal with criminals than chopping them to pieces. So, what did he do? He designed this kind of building as prison. And to show you what's there, it's circular, with the cells facing inward, and at the inside only cages. So it's open, so you can view inside the cells. You see here that too. Then in the middle of it, there's a small booth with windows on all sides and curtains for it, in front of it. And in that little booth, there's a guard sitting. So the guard can watch at any time any prisoner. He can see what he's doing in his cell. The prisoners can't see if the guard is watching. They even can't see if there's a guard in there or not. They just are left uncertain if they are under surveillance at that moment or not. And the guard can file the prisoners for reward or punishment. They might even have some hour out of the cell cleaning the toilets or something like that. If they behaved very well, they might skip a meal if they didn't behave very well. But he made a total system of surveillance and reward and punishment to force the prisoners to be good and brave civilians again. Well, such a system, such a panopticon, to create it in a building or more virtual, has always been a tremendous expensive thing to do. The filing has been a lot of work, administration. The surveillance has been an immense costly thing. So it was very difficult to build panopticons. Extremely costly. But in the digital age, it became lots and lots cheaper. The gathering of the information, getting it all together, quite cheap, you know. Hand out all your customers a card of 10 cents with a barcode on it, and you're almost there. Also, the storage in databases, the warehousing, is become incredibly much cheaper too. So, what happened? How far away from a panopticon are we? Well, not very far away. And also note that there are some situations in a society where we do accept panopticons. You know, maintaining the traffic rules, maintaining the speed limits is something that is happening on a quite panopticon way. You know, when you're on the road, there is surveillance. You don't know exactly where and when there is surveillance. There are hidden speed cameras, there are hidden police cars checking the traffic. There's all kinds of surveillance, hidden or not. And there's, of course, when you do some speeding with your car, there are the fines and the tickets. There's the system of punishment. So that's a totally accepted panopticon in our society. Schools are another example of a panoptical system. People are quite nice, or children are quite nicely forced into being brave civilians by it. But then, to go back to the discussion, how much is the internet a panopticon? With every website I visit, I leave the traces in the logs. So, is it a panopticon? Is the internet a panopticon? Well, I say no, maybe not yet. Because the filing is there already. And there are lots of systems, and that's more than only the internet that do the surveillance. The only question is, well, they are coming for free now. The only question is there the political feeling, the need to change the behavior of people? Do we think we will have to use this information to change the behavior of people, and do we couple the reward and punishment on it? So, the whole idea of the panopticon from Bentham is changed into a quite big challenge, because where do we draw the limit? Where do we want to use all this information for? What kind of relation do these organizations want to have with us? Well, I'm quite fast, I see. I think it's time for questions or discussion. I hope everything was clear. I think there's a lot of more to say about almost every slide, but I want to know if you have questions or reactions.
Are there people with questions?
If you look at a guard in the middle of your panopticon. If he's supposed to be our government, how would we install a system where we can check what the government checks on us?
The first question is, how does our government want to relate to us? If we have a government that say, I'm powerful, you're powerless, and I don't give a shit about it, then there is no need for privacy, there's no need for checks, there's no need for counterbalance. Then it's just a simple case, we are the nothings. But if the government says, I think civilians should have some power against the government, there should be some balance, we should make it equal, then I see a very strong case for all kind of government-induced privacy regulations, about a privacy watchdog, for rules of openness of government, that you can request your own file, that you can request other documents from the government. These are all questions that derive from the decision of us and our government of what kind of government we want. And I think you should remind your government about how they want to be, how they want to deal with their civilians, before you really should talk about openness of government or privacy or things like that. If there's not this will, then I see no case for privacy.
Anyone else want to ask a question? Well, in that case, very much thanks, Wilfried. I hope most of you can still sleep tonight, but in case you don't, after this there's the Stone Boot Kit in this tent. In tent 2 there's a somewhat related talk, privacy and stylometry, practical attacks against authorships, attribution techniques. And in the tent number 1, the Zonnehal, the super awesome cartoon quiz 2009.